Have you ever wondered how your sales performance compares against your competitors and peers? The B2B Sales Benchmark Report provides the definitive guide to what success looks like in 2021. See how you compare in terms of win rate, sales cycle, average deal value, relationships, and engagement. You can see the results and get the full report at ebster.com/B2B-sales-benchmarks. This is Sales Ops Demystified, the #1 most downloaded podcast in sales operations. We invite the brightest minds in sales operations onto the show to deconstruct the why, what, and how behind rep productivity, forecasting, metrics, and all things revenue. This podcast is brought to you by Ebster, the leading customer engagement platform for Salesforce. Hello and welcome to another special episode of Sales Ops Demystified. We are joined by Jeanette Appiah of Merkle. Hey Jeanette,
Hi.
Thank you for joining.
No problem.
And so I've been reviewing Jeanette's LinkedIn profile, and something that I think I'd like to focus on a little bit more in this interview is more on the finance side, because I see you had a role more in that side before officially becoming into sales operations. So we're going to get into that. Jeanette, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks so much for the opportunity. It's really cool.
No worries. So first question, how did you get into sales ops?
So I was a English and writing graduate in 2014, and I registered with an agency just to do some kind of temp work. I actually just came by sales ops for the off chance. I started working at a exhibitions company, and they introduced me to the system that they use for sales operations, which is Salesforce. And I think ever since then, it's just been kind of a progression from there. So
did you that job that you applied for the job in sales operations? You saw the job.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. So they, I guess the agency kind of explained to me what the specifications and kind of the day-to-day responsibilities of what I'd have to do. And it was very admin based at first. So in terms of entry level, it was very kind of data entry and just daily kind of data quality and just making sure that the information and the data that the sales teams were entering is correct. And it was very kind of contract based as well. So making sure that all of the contracts and the legal requirements for each sales deal, is accurate and correct. So it wasn't very technical or process driven and very admin based. So really kind of gave me like the low level taste to sales ops, which I mean, for me, it was very straightforward. And paid the bills at the time, so it was quite useful.
And so you were there for 3 years.
Correct. Yeah. So I left and came back, and they offered me a permanent position. I took that on, and I officially kind of managed the finance or the sales ops side of a specific exhibition. And so everyone had their own exhibition that they, kind of they oversaw, they managed on the sales and kind of financial legal side. So, I managed to kind of manage my own exhibitions, which was one of the biggest ones in the company. So
what's an example
really
of an exhibition, just so people...
Sorry?
Well, what's an example of one of the exhibitions?
So one recent one that they've actually just done was Money 2020. So they did have a range, and they've sold a few, and they've really transitioned into a more data driven or kind of technology driven exhibitions company. But they previously had retail ones, so autumn fair, spring fair. They also had a fashion one called Pure. So they had such a huge range, and it was very retail driven. And now they've actually sold them off. And now they have more, like I said, yeah, they've got more of a kind of financial and tech background. Cannes Lions as well as one of the ones that they have.
Awesome. So you're responsible for the sales and the operations and the finance and the legal part for these exhibitions.
Correct.
Yeah, cool. So
Yeah.
a bit broader than sales operations.
Oh, very broad. But I mean, the experience has given me a lot to kind of use in different kind of scenarios and situations. Whereas when your role is very defined, you don't really have that, I guess, knowledge or that background to really know how to be flexible in certain situations where, a new aspect of your role comes in. So,
Got it.
yeah.
And then you moved to Merkle, which is where you are now.
Correct.
And
Yeah.
it is a more traditional sales operations role.
Yes. So when I started last year, it's about a year ago, last week. Time has kind of flown by, but they effectively didn't have a sales ops process or team or function when I started. So they had started using Salesforce back in February 2018. So they've had a few months of kind of transitioning and adjusting to, creating sales deals, etc. But there really wasn't a sales ops department or process or a real kind of solid foundation of how to really go through the sales path process and ensure that you're correctly updating opportunities, etc. So when I started, that was really kind of my aim and kind of my key function, as my beginning role. Really implementing processes, getting kind of sales teams in order, and really allowing them that independency to monitor their own opportunities, monitor their own deals, reports, etc. So, I mean, that was really, really insightful. Again, from my first experience of working somewhere so low level where you are looking at all different aspects of sales ops and finance and kind of legal as well. This really allowed me to have a more visual, I guess, idea or expectations of how I want the business process to kind of flow through. So yeah, that really helped in that sense. So yeah, the first year has been a whirlwind, really trying to implement so many different processes, but sales team have been quite good.
Okay, that's good. Current sales ops tech stack.
So we currently use Salesforce. And kind of on a wider background, we actually work with the US team. So we are a bit of a smaller kind of team or region. So I cover pretty much the UK and some parts of Europe. I do have a counterpart in Europe as well, but I predominantly work with the Barcelona office and the Amsterdam office. So the US pretty much are the I guess say they're the headquarters for really developing Salesforce, and we have integrated with our parent group, and at the moment we are in the middle of integrating our Salesforce with their Salesforce and really kind of putting all of our processes together. And it's come at a time of where we're still trying to implement our process, and there have been, a lot of obstacles obviously in the way, but it's been a real learning curve to see how quickly and how rapid the movement of developing our Salesforce against, especially the other companies as well. Yeah, it's been really challenging to transition. Like I said, different group has different ways of processing or how they view things within a financial expectation, I guess, for revenue and for forecasting. So it's really about compromising and constant communication with the US teams to ensure that on our side, as well as a region as well, the US obviously do things differently as they do to the UK and to Europe. So it's really about combining and compromising. It's still a
Are
work
you
in progress.
using any other tools apart from Salesforce?
Salesforce is all that we're using at the
Mm.
moment
Okay.
within kind of like the sales ops. But then also in finance, we have different tools that we are actually transitioning and trying to merge together. Microsoft Dynamics is one that we're currently using to implement kind of like the invoicing, billing, accounting kind of feature. And hopefully that will eventually integrate into Salesforce as well.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
So you mentioned in your first role that a lot of what you're doing is ensure or you're responsible for data quality. What are you guys currently doing now at Merkle to ensure data quality in these different Salesforce orgs that you're merging?
Sure. So again, kind of I'm I guess the flow through of information to a lot of different departments. So I'm constantly running different meetings for a legal team, ensuring that they're covered, or we're covering ourselves with the data that we have on Salesforce. So I'm constantly kind of monitoring and sending those informations and sending processes to them to ensure that we are on the right kind of legal page, or we're ensuring on our side that we have covered our backs effectively, as well as within finance as well. Obviously, the kind of the revenue structure that we have is based on monthly revenue as opposed to annual revenue. And as a bit of a background, we, I guess, measure our revenue based on monthly delivering income. So we will have work completed on a month by month basis, and the sales team really is their responsibility to ensure that the revenue that has been contracted is correct against the work that is being delivered. So as you can imagine, that's a lot of kind of monthly recognition and revenue, and really constantly making sure at the end of every month that that revenue is up to date. Um, as well as kind of general housekeeping, constant reports and dashboards, sending that over to the sales team and client services groups to ensure that they are keeping up to their opportunities. I mean, I've just had a meeting this morning about just ensuring that the opportunities that we do have set in place are expected to close within a certain time. Some sales members are obviously very eager to have their opportunities closed within a certain time frame, but it's all about being realistic with the figures that they've entered in place. So if you are looking at a 50 million pound deal that's being closed by the end of July, that's very incredibly optimistic.
Wow.
So that's just an example, but it's really kind of constantly capturing the information that is being put in on a daily basis, and really looking at it from an angle of, right, how is this reflecting the business, and I guess effectively what departments require this information to be accurate. The department thing really helps to align, I guess, where those fields are being pulled from and into, and it also gives the sales leads an insight into how important it is to keep up their information. I mean, from their perspective, they're just entering in the information and hoping for the best, as opposed to not really realizing that that information is really pivotal for another department's kind of focus on that sales deal. So.
Now moving on to salespeople,
Yeah.
how would you get buy-in or influence the sales team to say, do something new within data quality? How do you persuade them to do that?
Very good question, because it's always very challenging, but I do like a challenge. So within Merkle, we have obviously a stage progression, or I mean, a lot of companies have kind of different stages of how likely the sales deal will be completed. And within that kind of structure, I always try to implement that it has changed within the stage, as opposed to highlighting that a new stage has been implemented. The reason why I do this is because it's all about kind of, I guess, the communication. And for a salesperson to hear there is a new process in place, it's in terms of their behavior, you can always tell that it's going to be a challenge for them to adjust to something new. Um, and it's really about the language that you use. So instead of saying, there is a new process in place, always say, that there's a slight change in the existing process. So you can still do X, Y, and Z, but here's what you have to do differently. Again, it's all about the language that you use. I've learned if you let the sales team know that, hey, we're changing the whole new process. Forget everything that you've known before for 4 years, and this is what you have to do now. It's a real struggle. Fortunately, the way that we kind of implement our processes, we really fine tooth every single part of that stage. Again, working with the US team to develop that stages and really kind of go through the testing, working with a sales lead just to kind of visualize how they see the process actually taking place. So we would implement an example and really kind of gain feedback from one of the sales leads, see if it works and adjust for them. And then we kind of slot that into a part of the stages or all of the stages together. Constant training as well. So I run twice a month the training sessions for the sales leads if they're new or existing. And obviously, hundreds of material that I create. So
yeah. Onboarding salespeople, do you have a specific structure in place?
yes. So again, it kind of works or ties into the US and IT. So usually once a sales lead or a sales user, sometimes it's not always the sales users, it's sometimes a client. We have, I guess, kind of account managers in place as well. They will request for a license. And again, the process usually is that once the license has been provisioned, I would provide training. So it's a hour and a half long session, really kind of fine toothing the whole process from beginning to end, how to create opportunities accounts. And that's kind of the basics of the first session. The second session is more based on reports, dashboards, and dashboards are really, really useful for the sales team and the account managers to kind of keep up to date. Again, housekeeping, but also looking at their revenues and how far they are against their KPIs and their targets, etc. So it's really an all-rounder and ongoing monthly sessions for any kind of Salesforce queries also. I implement that. So again, the role is very kind of people managing, people communicating. So if you find that difficult, it's a quite difficult role to get into.
Yeah. We have a question. How do you define and measure success in sales operations?
Oh, that's a good question. I would definitely put it down to the smooth running. I think smooth running is really pivotal. And in terms of measuring that, it is looking at, so I have, let's say, for example, multitude of reports that show kind of the lack of data quality in some opportunities. So I'm looking at specific fields within opportunities or accounts or revenue. And all of that really kind of works together in terms of looking at how well the process is working. If we are looking at large volumes of sales deals or accounts that are coming up incorrectly, we really need to review the way we are training the sales users, or B, the way that they are being delivered that information in order to enter it into the system. So in terms of the sales process and measuring that, I really kind of look at the way how likely on those reports if the data quality is down to zero, or the in terms of, I guess, the general sales information that have been entered into the system. So as long as the revenue looks accurate as well. So it really is just about the smooth running of the processes that are being taken place. Of
Yeah.
course, queries are are natural to people. People are going to forget certain processes, etc. But it really is just looking at kind of the figures and seeing, there's zero opportunities that are incorrect, or that this sales user is actually training another sales user how to use the system. It really is
Mhm.
about kind of delivering that information correctly.
Sure. Are you currently doing anything to make the sales team more productive?
Yes. As much as I guess it's a love-hate relationship. I love to bother them, and they hate hate when I bother them. Um, so I'm constantly sending, I guess, subscription reports. So there are a few reports that I automatically give the sales team to subscribe to, and I constantly keep up with them in terms of that process. But also from a financial perspective, we reconcile the revenue at the end of the month. So I usually send 3 or 4 warnings just to let them know the following kind of sales deals either need to have their close dates pushed out, or the revenue schedules updated also. Again, really monitoring kind of the revenue on a monthly basis, but also looking at it weekly. We also have a week on week kind of pipeline change. So I effectively create a report that outlines any clients that have had like week on week variances. So if they've gone down in value as the stage is progressing, etc. And we also have a weighted pipeline, so we always weight how likely against the confidence level the revenue that's been
Mhm.
entered in, how likely that revenue is going to be pulled through once the sales deal's been closed. So yeah, again, it's constant monitoring and reports, but reports that can be, I guess, visualized and read to a sales lead as opposed to just
Yeah.
providing them that information.
Got it. And what KPIs are you currently tracking?
So as I mentioned, revenue is based on the monthly spend. So we really look at various financial revenue kind of definitions. We look at the annual contractual value. We look at the revenue that's being delivered in year. We also look at, again, like I said, the kind of the monthly value according to department. Um, we look at the total contract revenue. There's so many different kind of revenue based
Mhm.
visuals that we look at, but the most kind of, I guess, common one is the new business deals that are coming through. So we do monitor a lot of the new business on a total contract value basis, and I'm effectively ensuring that against what has been weighted, so their confidence levels, making sure that the percentages, so if it's 50% likely that the deal is going to close at 1.5 million, we weight that to ensure that that is a guarantee at that certain stage. And again, them entering that information and filling it in benefits them because it makes them kind of, obviously, looking at the revenue, or dependent on the revenue, ensures that they're keeping up with their client activity effectively.
Got it. I think we have another question.
Sure.
Do you have a process in place when you're looking for new tech tools?
Ooh, that's a good question. Um, so I wouldn't say we have a process set in place, only because, again, we heavily liaise with the US admin team. We do have monthly calls for on a global scale. So we have all of the global, I guess, sales ops teams or finance ops teams um, coming together and really discussing and implementing suggestions for a new process or a new tool to be set in place. So, for example, the Microsoft Dynamics we also have another system called Navision, which will be for the accounting software. We have like ongoing weekly meetings to discuss kind of the suggestion all the way through to implementation to delivering that and offloading it across. So again, gathering kind of as much information as possible. Fortunately for Salesforce, we do have a developers kind of edition, so you can kind of separately look in a sandbox and download that tool and just see kind of how it works within your system and how likely it is to integrate and how easy it is also, because fortunately for Salesforce as a tool, it's globally known, and it's become a software that is so easy to download for new tools using their app exchange, and there's reviews, etc. So it really is a matter of doing your research and dedicating time to look into how likely the tool is going to adjust within your system. Yeah.
Awesome. And then final question, who has taught you the most or inspired you the most in sales operations?
Ooh. Do you know what? I would actually say it's a lot of the users across Trailblazer. So Trailblazer is a community on Salesforce where there are so many different sales ops, developers, consultants, all within the Salesforce field. And when you're looking at the community and you could go into that community and ask them a question about, or you've got a real dilemma, and the community really comes together and gives you such useful information and new process suggestions, and all because we're all in the same boat. Effectively, we all really need to find a really simple, quick solution to complicated matters. And as much as they don't know much about, I guess, the background of your company or how how the process works, there is always kind of an identifier with the way that the process needs to, take place. Unfortunately, it's not a specific person, but I guess as a community, they're really, really useful.
Salesforce have built an insane community, haven't they?
It's incredible.
That brings us to the end of the interview. Here's a few things I picked out. I think you said this, where how your broader experience over operations, finance, and legal helped you now understanding the business that you're in sales. And I think that's super important. Like if anybody else can somehow get more broader operations or finance business experience, that'll really help them in their role. When trying to implement a new process, going to the sales leads first, because I assume they can then trickle down the process once they've understood and bought in. And then finally, visual data to salespeople. I think that's quite important. I don't want to stereotype, but I would say that potentially salespeople are more like visual, or they like pretty graphs. And so that was a nice insight as well.
For sure.
Jeanette, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom with the audience.
No problem. Thank you so much. It's been really fun.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Sales Ops Demystified podcast. If you are listening on a podcast listening application, then please subscribe, rate, and review. And if you have any questions about the show, if you know a guest, or if you have any questions about sales operations, just hit me up at tomhunt@ebster.com. That's tomhunt@ebster.com.